You Are the Placebo by Dr. Joe Dispenza. Now, there's so much to discuss from this book, so we'll be infusing the information in the upcoming discussions. And today I want to focus on the mental rehearsal process in relation to epigenetics. And I want to tie this first into Sunday's video in which we spoke of imagining what implies ecstatic or the feeling of ecstasy, recognizing that what implies that not only changes how we perceive reality, but also plays itself out, manifests itself in different areas of our lives, symbolic representations of that feeling. If you haven't watched that video, I recommend watching it. I'll put a link in the description. Now, this quote was also brought up in that video from William Blake. He says, "Does a firm persuasion that a thing is so make it so?" He replied, "All poets believe it does. And in ages of imagination, this firm persuasion removes mountains. But many are not capable of a firm persuasion of anything." Let's look at this diagram right here, which was also in the book. It's a diagram that he put together of the mind. So in the top, we've got the conscious mind, which makes up 5%. Then we got the subconscious mind, makes up 95%. And in between here, what seems to create a disharmony between the conscious and the subconscious is over-analytical, overthinking, that seem to create a conceptual barrier. It's not an actual physical barrier when it comes to accessing our subconscious, and more specifically put, changing the programming within so that we can experience our body being an expression of mind, subconscious mind, the way we want to experience it. Now, for me, as I've gone through this journey, I've learned to let go of certain suggestions, or more accurately put, my interpretation in regards to suggestions that I receive on how should I perform at a certain age, how should I behave, and what we want to find is our own resonant meaning in regards. Because if we start to identify with doubt, fear, condemnation-based thinking in regards to ourselves, in regards to others, we might start to overly think in regards to the suggestions that we give ourselves. We speak a lot in regards to self-suggestion. We have the power to suggest to ourselves, and through the acceptance of these suggestions upon the subconscious mind, the body expresses. Let's talk about epigenetics. So he says the word epigenetics literally means above the gene. It refers to the control of genes, not from within the DNA itself, but from messages coming from outside the cell, in other words, from the environment. Now, we'll discuss this up to a certain degree, and I recommend reading this book and all of his work, actually, because him and Bruce Lipton get into far more discussion in regards to epigenetics. And I enjoy studying their work as I continuously now find a deeper fascination for epigenetics. So he says, epigenetics teaches that we indeed are not doomed by our genes, and that a change in human consciousness can produce physical changes, both in structure and function in the human body. I remember I met someone when I was 24 years old. She was 29 years old, and she had 3 kids, and she looked like she was 19 years old. And she worked in the company that I used to work for. And I asked her one time, "What is your secret? Why do you look so young?" And she said, "You know what? I just like to have fun. I just like to have a great time, and I don't stress." And something about the way she said it, I accepted that suggestion. I didn't analyze it. I just accepted it. And I realize now that that acceptance of that suggestion was impressed upon my subconscious mind. And I notice now that I look and feel younger. I have far more energy today than I ever had, and I believe is because I accepted this suggestion. So he says epigenetics teaches that we indeed are not doomed by our genes, and that a change in human consciousness, as we've been discussing, a change in consciousness reflects, expresses as the bodily changes from the acceptance of the suggestion that we give to ourselves, be it from someone else or ourselves. And remember, we are the only suggester. So what you say to yourself, you have the ability to consciously accept it. And I'm going to go through a process, which he describes as well in the book, on how we can stimulate the subconscious mind by relaxing over analytical thinking in regards to the suggestion, which may argue within ourselves and bring forth doubt, condemnation, etc. He says, we can modify our genetic destiny by turning on the genes we want and turning off the ones we don't want through working with the various factors in the environment that program our genes. Some of those signals come from within the body, such as feelings and thoughts, while others come from the body's response to the external environment. So here's the key distinction here. From the body's response or our thinking patterns in relation to the external environment. And so he says the study of epigenetics raises the question, what if nothing changes in your external environment? And so this is one of my favorite parts of the entire book in regards to epigenetics and suggestion. He says, the study of epigenetics raises the question, what if nothing is changing in your external environment? What if you do the same things with the same people at exactly the same time every day, things leading to the same experiences that produce the same emotions, that signal the same genes in the same way? We could say that as long as you perceive your life through the lens of the past and react to the conditions with the same neural architecture and from the same level of mind, you're headed towards a very specific predetermined genetic destiny. In addition, what you believe about yourself, your life, and the choices you make as a result of those beliefs also keep sending the same messages to the same genes. Only when the cell is ignited in a new way, by new information, can it create thousands of variations of the same gene to rewrite a new expression of proteins, which changes your body, your beliefs, your perceptions, and how you interact with your external environment have an influence of your internal environment, which is still the external environment of the cell. This means that you, not your pre-programmed biology, hold the key to your genetic destiny. It's just a matter of finding the right key that fits into the right lock to unleash your potential. Now, he discusses one of these keys as mental rehearsal. So we'll talk about this in a moment and go through a process that we can work with, which is similar to the suggestion that was given. Because when she said that to me, I just believed it. As a matter of fact, we find, if we go back here, when William Blake said, "Does a firm persuasion that a thing is so make it so?" He replied, "All poets believe it does." What we're finding is that poets have a greater ability to influence the subconscious mind because they have a deeper relationship with the subconscious mind to pull creative ideas from the infinite world of imagination and express it. And they do this in practice by maintaining the flow. And I also believe that we are all actually artists. If we go back to where we were when we were children, we wanted to naturally express, creatively express. And what I'm suggesting all throughout these videos, and I'm seeing the parallels in all of these books and discussions, is the connecting back to how we were when we had what he refers to as the brain and heart coherence. The heart desires, the mind expresses. So we receive a desire and we consciously stimulate in our imagination a vision. And we say, that's how it is. It really is that way. Whether someone had suggested it to us or we suggested it to ourselves, we are still allowing whatever suggestion to be accepted within. And when we say that's how it actually is, and we don't argue with that suggestion within ourselves, these over-analytical based thinking patterns, arguing with the suggestion, it is then accepted into the subconscious mind, and all of these changes occur. Now, as mentioned, he gets into a very lengthy discussion in regards to epigenetics. And we don't have to know these things. We just want to encourage ourselves back to this childlike way of being, and this time be more suggestible to what is actually true and resonant. Because perhaps the person had allowed themselves in a childlike state, certainly I had in earlier stages of my journey, to accept certain suggestions that aren't in harmony with how I truly want to be. And so we can make peace with that programming by doing the subconscious mind work. I recommend watching the almost 2-hour video I did on Power of the Subconscious Mind by Joseph Murphy. Because as we make peace with certain thinking patterns or belief systems within ourselves, we notice that the doubt-based programming, the frustration-based programming, the lack of belief-based programming, or any kind of overthinking, over-analytical in regards to the suggestion is not there. And we find that it's easier for us to listen to ourselves. And we can develop this with practice. I also recommend making flow a priority, which we will refer to brainwave states in a moment to emphasize. And so let's talk about mental rehearsal. The technique is basically closing your eyes and repeatedly imagining or performing an action and mentally reviewing the future you want. And so what happens then, and let's zoom in here, this diagram, the thoughts of what we're imagining influences the neural networks, influences the neuropeptides and hormones, sends epigenetic signal to the cells, which facilitates activation of cell receptor sites, which influences DNA selection and regulation, expression of proteins, expression of life, which expresses as health of body. And as mentioned, one does not need to think about all these changes and the sequence that occurs. What they could do is apply this information. Now, when William Blake mentioned in the quote, "All poets believe it does," we want to relate over to brainwave states. So we got gamma waves, beta waves, alpha waves, theta waves, and delta waves. Now, beta waves is normal waking state, concentration. And in this state, someone is more identified with the five sensory experience than their imagination. And what we want to understand is that the subconscious mind is being impressed by both the five sensory information, or more specifically put, how we relate to the five sensory information, as well as what we are imagining to be reality, both at the same time. And again, it's the suggestions in relation to. Now, this beta wave state is helpful for certain tasks, projects, maybe if you're working with spreadsheets and so forth, day-to-day activities, it's helpful. However, poets, let's say, or the artists, tend to operate more in alpha theta. Flow happens more in alpha. So when a person's in flow or alpha state, they find themselves to be a lot more suggestible, which is one of the reasons why I suggest making flow a priority. And individuals who, let's say, are too much on the beta side and get into overthinking, again, let's go back to the diagram here, overthinking, overly analytical, it's beneficial to think, it's beneficial to analyze, but we're talking about overthinking, over-analytical. They might find themselves being overly reactive, overly biased, overly rigid to certain perspectives, as we discussed in the principle of polarity-based discussions when we refer to the Kabbalion. And I did a discussion on the transmutation of fear energy over to courage energy. I'll put a link in the description to that video. And so what happens is that when a person receives a suggestion, they suggest to themselves that they are this person that they desire to be, and they're overthinking it, they might start arguing with themselves, and could also even play out as arguing with others on aspects that have nothing to do with accepting the suggestions, but rather revealing certain beliefs and thinking patterns that they have about themselves. And if they find that they have these recurring thinking patterns that seem to create this disconnect, and again, this disconnect is in mind, they can benefit from doing the subconscious mind work to change those thinking patterns around. And then they'll find that it is easier to accept the suggestions. And so what he describes in his process is actually getting into the theta wave, or a state akin to sleep, as we've been discussing in our Neville Goddard conversations, and imagining ourselves doing a behavior or performance, if you're an athlete or a musician, or if you want to experience your body a certain way, to actually imagine yourself in first-person perspective, going through the experiences of having that ideal experience in life, whatever it'll be. Having the flexibility if you're a dancer, having that energy, health, etc. And it's a simple process that I put into 6 steps here. Number 1, find a time and place where you won't be interrupted. Number 2, close your eyes. Take deep breaths and exhale slowly. Free your mind of distractions and allow your mind to focus on the relaxation process. So simply let go of the thoughts or thinking patterns. Recognize that you are not the thinking patterns. You'll get better at it with practice, and you'll find yourself actually relaxing to a deeper degree. You'll move from beta to alpha and theta. You'll actually find that as you do this more often, that you'll be able to feel what brainwave state you are in. As I've been making flow a priority, and I recommend watching my flow series and working with this information, I can feel when I'm in beta or alpha or theta. I can certainly visually see when I'm in theta, because I notice that imagination becomes even more vivid. As I had mentioned earlier, and as he discusses in the book, we want to see imagination as the reality during this process. That experiencing via our mind's eye imagination as the reality, our 5 sensory experience in our imagination, which could include sight, sound, taste, and you want to experiment with this and find what works for you. For me, it's internal conversations and some visual scenes. I also find that I could work with scent in my imagination. For example, if I'm imagining something that involves a beach, I can smell the ocean. And so what we do is we bring ourselves into that relaxed theta. And so what I found next is, at this stage, I'm not overthinking. I'm not being overly analytical. I can ask my subconscious mind certain questions. So I say, what would it look like if it were true? And I will get a imaginal scene pop up in my mind's eye, in my imagination, of actually seeing myself expressing a certain way, being a certain way, which would imply that I am that person. And so what we do is we take that scene and we visualize ourselves as an active participant, as in first person, experiencing ourselves in the ideal performance, or how we would be healthy, energized, and even include a conversation if you'd like, having a conversation with someone else, sharing how you feel. And you repeat this in its vividness in your imagination again and again until you feel it as reality. You will feel the wholeness of it, as sometimes he refers to this. I've heard him say this a number of times in his videos. which to me ties into the infinite potentiality that exists in regards to epigenetics. So when I feel this, I know that the change has been initiated. And then it's number 6. Open your eyes and go about your day knowing that you have initiated the changes. Now, this process is very simple, and perhaps the analytical mind might start to think, how is it going to happen? Where is it going to happen? This is the key of how we really want to represent ourselves on the journey to realizing that vision. He says, to be happy with yourself in the present moment while maintaining a dream of your future is a grand recipe for manifestation. When you feel so whole that you no longer care whether it will happen, that's when amazing things materialize before your eyes. And one of the reasons why I believe this is so is because we're actually allowing the changes to happen. Rather than identifying with doubt or fear-based thinking patterns, which create unnecessary complexity on the journey to realizing our vision. And as mentioned, if a person has recurring thought process beliefs that seem to surface, we want to recognize we are not actually those thoughts and beliefs. And if they seem to be persistent, then work with the power of the subconscious mind to discover those beliefs and make peace with them. And also include meditation. Because what I found, and I've had this conversation with many others, they actually experience a reconciliation within themselves. They start to notice that day to day thinking patterns in which they once saw as conflict, they're able to reconcile and make peace with seemingly different conflicting viewpoints. Which then, if we go back here, this part right here that seems to act like a barrier, creating unnecessary overthinking, overanalyzing, no longer exists. A person then has a deeper harmonious relationship between the conscious and subconscious mind. And we experience what he refers to as the brain and heart coherence, in which a person can imagine themselves to be a certain way and accept that suggestion and facilitate that change to experience what he refers to here. He says, to be happy with yourself in the present moment while maintaining a dream of your future is a grand recipe for manifestation. When you feel so whole that you no longer care whether it will happen, that's when amazing things materialize before your eyes. So as mentioned in Sunday's video, I prefer to get to the destination and also get there first class, flow-based journey to the destination. He says, I've learned that being whole is the perfect state of creation. So I relate this to having all the potentiality available to me, within me, to make my vision a reality. All I do is imagine myself or visualize myself or speak to myself in a way that implies it is that way to initiate all the changes within and reflect accordingly. Body is an expression of mind. The five sensory experience then is in harmony to what we imagine in our mind's eye as the true reality. And he says, I've seen this time and time again in witnessing true healings in people all over the world. They feel so complete that they no longer want, no longer feel lack, and no longer try to do it themselves. They let go, and to their amazement, something greater than they are responds, and they laugh at the simplicity of the process. And so we're working with the power of the subconscious mind, and we're stimulating the subconscious mind ability via conscious thought and allowing it to be and suggesting to ourselves. And as mentioned, if we have challenges doing this on the day-to-day journey by simply suggesting to ourselves, I found that this is way easier to do this now, to just suggest to myself as I maintain my flow, then we can work with the mental rehearsal process. So I trust you found this video to be helpful. Let's go ahead and conclude this with an auto-suggestion to further encourage what he mentions here. You could say, I recognize that I am happy with myself in the present moment, knowing that how I see myself to be in imagination has initiated the changes to reflect accordingly. I recognize that amazing things materialize before my eyes by surrendering to the power of the subconscious mind. I understand that being whole is who I am right now. From this perfect state of creation, I witness the healings in myself and in others all over the world. I'm able to surrender to the vision realized, that which I saw in my imagination as the reality, which expresses itself as the five sensory experience from the change that was initiated from my mind's eye. If you would like a copy of this mind map, the link is in the description. Thank you very much for watching. I'll talk to you soon. Take care.